Okay,
Bye.
everything is active. We're now recording and showing two attendees. I assume Leslie Montgomery is the person we want to have as speaker,
Yes,
correct?
yes, that's correct.
Okay, I will activate her right now.
Okay.
Okay, Leslie, you're activated. Do you have a presentation that you want to show, or are you just going to speak?
Yeah, I have some slides that I can share.
Okay, hold on one second. I'll get you on there.
Great.
Okay, Leslie, you are now a panelist and you should be able to share your screen.
Mhm.
Hi, do you want me to try to share it real quick and see if it works?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
All right, let's see. All right. Can you see that okay? Great.
Yeah, just for context, Leslie is with us from the Green Building Alliance to talk about eco districts as a part of our planning for our climate action plan. And I thought before we take up a discussion of this in the Environmental Advisory Council, I wanted to have council aware of what we are looking at and have a chance to weigh in on whether you think this would be a good direction to take for our borough before I get the Environmental Advisory Council working on the implementation and advancing it. So this is an opportunity to ask questions and understand the framework of an eco district and have a chance to answer any questions that you may have about whether it might be appropriate for our community going forward. So Leslie Montgomery is with us from the Green Building Alliance. She's the Director of Outreach and Education. Is that correct? Or is that your title? Yeah, okay.
It's
And-
education director, either way. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
And she's a wonderful person. I'm really delighted to have her with us this evening. So Leslie, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Do you want me to start or should I wait? Hi, it's good? Okay, great. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you as well. Mhm.
Great. Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And before I start, I told Patty I have to do a tiny bit of show and tell because I found this Forest Hills Borough Directory from 1946 on my bookshelf that belonged to my grandfather. So I thought that was really cool. So it's just very good timing that I was cleaning my bookshelf and found that while I was getting ready for this presentation. So definitely excited to be with you tonight. So I just have a short presentation here. Like Patty said, I work at Green Building Alliance, and we've been operating in Pittsburgh for almost 30 years. Working at all different levels within the built environment, but more important than our work within the built environment is our work with people to help empower them to create healthy and high performing spaces. So, you know, I am familiar with some of the history of Forest Hills. Like I said, I've got some family history with, being familiar with it a little bit, but I've also taken some time to look over the comprehensive plan that you've put together, and Patty has told me about some of the goals that you have. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about a sustainable community development tool. But as I understand it, Forest Hills really is looking to continue its legacy of innovation, not just, in terms of things like Westinghouse, but also its sustainable innovation and trying to ensure a resilient future for future generations. And so I think some really fantastic examples that we've been excited about and that I've personally been excited about that you've already accomplished is, the signing on to the Paris Accord, the Tree City USA designation, and of course the Borough Building, which Patty knows I'm a big fan of, and at Green Building Alliance, we've already used it as an example a number of times for other communities. So as you plan for the future, as I understand it from reading through the comprehensive plan, you certainly want to maintain that strong legacy of innovation and sustainability while creating resilient community for generations to come. It seems that you have high value placed on your natural spaces and your diverse community members, and that some of your goals include increasing walkability, preserving natural spaces, and creating a destination where people can come while enhancing your business district, and then addressing challenges of stormwater and air quality like a lot of other communities in the region. So at Green Building Alliance, when we think about development and community development, we do always prioritize sustainable and equitable development. Our vision for our region is that every building and every community will be sustainable so that every person can thrive. And these are the goals that we use when thinking about community development. So there are a number of different models that municipalities and governments and communities can use while working towards sustainable development. A couple of them include, there's something called the Living Community Challenge, which is run by the International Living Future Institute, Lead for Neighborhood Development, which is operated out of the US Green Building Council, and then Eco Districts, which I'm going to talk about tonight. And Eco Districts is run by an organization called Eco Districts. And then here in our region, there's actually an organization called District PGH that some of you may be familiar with, which helps support other communities that want to achieve sustainable and equitable development, and often helps communities that are exploring the Eco Districts model. So GBA is a part of that group, but we don't work for any of these organizations, and we don't, tend to favor one over the other. They're all great models. But I do want to tell you about the Eco Districts model tonight. So the protocol, as it's referred to in Eco Districts, is a tool, and I'll explain a little bit more about how it can be used in a couple of minutes. But it was designed to inspire community development that commits to equity, resilience, and climate protection. Those are the three key cornerstones of this protocol. It supports multi-stakeholder collaboration, which is another main sort of differentiator that the Eco Districts really supports. It creates a comprehensive district scale roadmap as a guide, and it helps you report progress, committing to transparency if you decide to go for the certification. One of the interesting things about the Eco Districts protocol, and this actually can apply to other sustainable community models as well, but you can either pursue it as an official certification, or you can use it as a tool or a guide. And so any community can really decide, we really agree with these priorities and this framework, and so we're going to use it as a guide and overlay it over our plan, or we're going to use it as a framework. Or if you want to commit to that certification, that helps give you the stamp of approval, just like any other third-party certification, where it demonstrates that you have met certain impact areas and measurable goals. It is flexible and adaptable, and so it can really be modified to fit the needs of any community. In fact, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes, where you get to actually select the different priorities that you want to work towards. And like I said, it's flexible because you can really use it however works best for you. It provides an integrated range of solutions. A lot of the challenges and opportunities that our communities are facing are totally interconnected and interdependent on one another. The different systems within our communities depend on one another. And so this really addresses that and provides solutions that are integrated. And it works towards a people-centered and financially vibrant district scale sustainability model. So the key thing here, and this is something that GBA certainly agrees with, is that these issues, whether they be challenges or opportunities, are absolutely connected. Issues of equity, resilience, and climate protection. And so the Eco Districts protocol proposes laying, here you can see in this turquoise circle, laying equity, climate, and resilience at the center of decision making. And so they call this their imperatives. So these are the three key factors of this protocol that any community pursuing Eco Districts has to essentially commit to and center decision-making around these three things. So equity being the equal ability for everyone in your community to access this opportunity so that they can reach their full potential. Resilience, meaning that everyone in your community can withstand shocks and stresses. As a great example is international pandemic. How do we all withstand those shocks and stresses within our communities? And then certainly climate. How can we as a city or a neighborhood or a community greatly reduce the impact that we're having on climate? So these three key things, equity, climate, and resilience, are centered within the Eco Districts protocol as essentially the guideposts that you set your decision making on. They really help inform decision making. And that's something that I think is really valuable in any framework, whether you're focusing on sustainability or equity or innovation. Having your key values and your key priorities set so that you can really frame all of your decisions around those. These six orange components are what they call priorities. And I'm going to go into these a little deeper in a few minutes, but essentially the priorities help also set those more specific goalposts to measure against and to determine what do we want to accomplish within our community. And within these, I actually noticed a number of examples that I think align already with some of the goals within your plan. So the priorities will set different objectives that the community will work towards, but you actually get to select which ones you want to do. So you might say, oh, I can see that these three really align with our plan, and so these are the ones that we're going to go with. And I'll go into that in a few more minutes. And then this implementation, the green part, is a pretty straightforward phasing of how a community would pursue either certification under eco districts or utilize it. And so the formation phase is where you determine, okay, is this the right framework for us? How would we want to approach it? What would the organizing structure look like? And really determining whether or not to commit to it. The roadmap is where you identify, which priorities you want to focus on, and you start to baseline some of those things and determine what your starting point is. And then the performance is when you move forward and start doing things and learning things. This is kind of another way to look at it. Again, these are the imperatives: equity, resilience, climate protection. The priorities are place, prosperity, health and well-being, connectivity, living infrastructure, and resource regeneration. And then there are objective categories under each of those priorities. And again, you get to select which ones you would want to pursue. And again, a lot of these I think overlap with some things that you're already planning. And then these are your implementation phases. So a little look at some more specifics here. If you wanted to take a look at some of the indicators under equity, for the imperatives in particular, they want you to pursue high levels of civic participation, economic opportunity, health and well-being of your citizens. What is your physical surroundings like? Can everybody walk safely around the region or the town? Sorry, I have a little pop-up here. Under resilience, they're looking at social resilience, economic resilience, and environmental resilience. And then under climate protection, they're looking at energy use and production and your CO2 emissions. If you want to take a look at some of the priorities, you'll see here the objective categories under the place priority are on engagement and inclusion. I mentioned at the top that they really, I may not have mentioned this word, but they really value collective impact in the eco districts model. So what can we do together, and how can we engage the largest number of stakeholders to ensure that the decisions being made in the community are going to be good for everybody? What's the culture and identity look like? What about your public places? Is there affordable housing opportunities? So these are just some of the, these are just a couple of examples of the priorities and the objectives underneath them. If you look at health and well-being, food production, health and affordable fresh food access, toxic environment. So looking at things like air quality, something that has already, I recall reading in your plan, enhancing walkability. So these are all things, the objectives and categories are priorities that you would select for your specific community and determine what you want to work towards. The indicators are how you measure those. So it just gives you really pretty clear-cut methods of tracking performance and setting measurable goals. And that can be something that a lot of communities struggle with. They may have the goals in mind that they want to achieve, but maybe they don't have a good set of indicators or measurable goals. And no matter what framework, if you select a framework, I think that can be useful, because in different types of sustainable community certifications or standards or frameworks. What I do really appreciate about them is that they use research and current best practices to set standards for the way that we can approach healthy and high performing places. And then they actually can set a way for all of us to measure ourselves against those best practices and to really achieve those measurable outcomes. Under living infrastructure, some of the objectives are relating to access to nature, which I know is a priority of yours, and then rainwater management, which is an issue for all of us in Western Pennsylvania. So that's just kind of a look at within the protocol, how things are structured and how things are set up to help different communities or municipalities or neighborhoods identify their goals and then determine how to measure impact. A case study that I thought would be worth looking at, and I don't know that much about this case study, but one of my colleagues wanted me to present it to you because she saw some similarities among your priorities and the goals of this Tower Site Innovation District. So if you'd like, I can send some follow-up information if you want to look into it a little bit more. This is in Minneapolis, St. Paul. The Tower Site Innovation District, they were at the Eco Districts Summit that was hosted in Pittsburgh last year. So some of the similarities that I thought were interesting was, one option that you have is to really identify the business district as a boundary. There's always a boundary for what you determine you want to focus on. They had stormwater, stormwater challenges and priorities, parking, getting people connected to the public realm, district-wide energy was on their list for what they wanted to accomplish. And they were looking at transportation and development and innovation. So I don't think they're officially certified yet, but I think they're planning on it in 2022, I think is when they're hoping to have certification. So this is an example of a community that's actually pursuing the official certification. Many of you are also probably very familiar with some of the local eco district initiatives that have been happening around Pittsburgh. Millvale certainly is one that they're always willing to share their experiences. And they have also expanded into a tri-borough eco district with Etna and Sharpsburg. And then I have Riverwise up here in Beaver County. They've actually identified 4 different communities within Beaver County that they would like to pursue or at least use the eco districts framework. And I know that some of the reasons that those different communities identified the eco districts framework as one that they wanted to utilize was that collective impact model. But also, I recall Beaver County saying that they just liked the fact that a lot of other communities were in process and could help share their experiences. And it's something that a lot of different communities can use as a mutual learning opportunity, because everyone's always going to be at a different phase within their plan. And whether it's adhering to a specific model or framework or not, everyone, is always on a different point within their path towards sustainable development, resilient development. And it's just a really great opportunity for people to be able to learn from each other. So I did mention District PGH, which is sort of helping different communities explore that model. And I just think that you could learn a lot from these folks in terms of their experiences, why they selected this framework, and what their lessons learned are. So in determining whether or not this might be a good fit for the borough, I think that this model certainly could be one that could help continue the borough's tradition of innovation. It's probably not the only one, but it could be a good fit. I did notice, like I said, some similarities among the priorities within the eco districts model and what's already been laid out and identified in your comprehensive plan, and within the leadership and sustainability that you've already demonstrated. I think it takes a proactive and comprehensive approach to multiple challenges and opportunities. So like I said a few minutes ago, none of the issues within our communities are separate issues. They're all connected and they're all interdependent. And so I think we need solutions and strategies that can uplift all of, all of those different goals, social equity, resilience, climate, together. I think it's a benefit that there are other local municipalities and boroughs that have already begun working under this model, because you've got a local brain trust of folks who can help guide you. And I really appreciate that it does center decision-making. And whether it's a single building project or a community project, it can be incredibly difficult to make long-term decisions without having those decisions really centered on very specific values. And so when you have, and these may be your 3 key values, maybe it's something different, but it really helps to have, like I said, a guidepost or a lighthouse where you know when you're trying to make a decision, what is driving that decision and what are the key things that are non-negotiable for you. I really appreciate that it's flexible and adaptable. So like I said, you can really pursue this any which way you want. You can either say, I'm going to take the list and I'm going to read the list while I'm, writing the rest of our plan, or you can say, we're going to go for it and pursue certification. There's a whole spectrum of ways that you can engage with the framework. So different pathways, like I mentioned, if you wanted to engage with this protocol or the framework, again, you can just use it as a guide. You can pursue certification, which would consist of a number of specific steps. You can incorporate these principles into an overlay, a zoning overlay if you want. My recommendation is, certainly to speak with other boroughs and municipalities. And I know that Patty knows a number of people who already have been pursuing this. So if I was wondering if I would get questions about possible next steps, if it were the case that you would want to pursue certification under the Eco Districts model, which again would connect you to other resources as well on the national scale, and provide that stamp of approval and a little bit more concrete guidance. The first thing that you would do is do the formation. So you would say, as a group, do we want to commit to this? Are we ready to commit to this? Do we want to use Eco Districts as our certifying framework? You would establish the organizational capacity, who's going to manage this, how is that going to work? And they want you to commit to collaboration and to engaging stakeholders, and then establishing your own procedures and how that's going to work. Within the roadmap section of these larger scale steps, that's where you actually get to choose the priorities and objectives that you would want to pursue. And like I said, you probably already have a very good indication of what those would be. You would select your indicators and start setting targets and baselines, and start to assemble your roadmap, which may end up looking similar to the comprehensive plan, but maybe would have some of those targets and baselines established. And then you, under the performance section of the roadmap, you essentially start working and you report your progress back to the Eco Districts organization, and you learn along the way. So those would be the steps that would be involved if you did in fact determine that this was a framework that you wanted to use. And that's what I have for you today. I just wanted to give you a look sort of under the hood at the Eco Districts framework, help you understand it in context to the planning that you're already doing, and hopefully answer any questions that you have.
Okay, I have a question briefly. I noticed you mentioned Millville, Etna, and Sharpsburg. I had sat in on a session with, I think, Etna, and I guess they had started this whole process using a citizens group. Is that something we would do, or would we use the Environmental Advisory Council? Maybe Patty would answer that more than you would, Leslie. I don't know, but just curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. How do you see that working, Patty?
Well, I think we have a couple of options. One being, of course, to continue in the process that we used for the comprehensive plan, coordinating it through the Environmental Advisory Council as part of our climate action plan. The other possibility would be to engage the Community Development Corporation as a newly reestablished entity in town, to give them a focus for their action and interface with the business community. One of the concerns that I have at this point is that our efforts to get the business community engaged have been sort of interrupted by the COVID situation. We really weren't able to hold the business roundtable as part of the comprehensive plan process, partly because I got sick in the middle of it and wasn't able to convene it. But I think also it's just been difficult under the current circumstances to do that. And I think that's something we do need to look at. So I would really be open to input from the council about the best ways that you think we might engage our business community in pursuing this, because it would be largely a way to reframe and rethink and refurbish our business district. So we really have to have the owners involved and the business owners in our area involved, and have a way to talk to them about this and see what their ideas are.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
No, just a thought. I mean, we have the Environmental Advisory Council in place with certainly people who are willing and dedicated. So I would think it would make sense to continue with the structures we have rather than trying to create anything new. But that's just a thought.
I actually have a couple of questions. Leslie, this is Frank Porco speaking, and I apologize. This may be redundant. I did join late, so I apologize in advance if it is. Just can you walk me through a community who has adopted this, who did it well, what were the attributes that made it successful? And was it primarily driven out of council? Was it primarily driven out of a like a community group or a 501(c)(3)? Can you just, I'm asking for just like a 2 or 3 minute overview, not a detailed one, because
Sure.
I'm sure you kind of covered this as part of your presentation.
I didn't go that deep. No, I think, and actually one thing about the framework is that it can be used by governments, by community organizations, or by the private sector. So it is designed to be able to have any of those types of entities really holding the framework and leading it.
Okay.
I know that in Beaver County, they're just starting to explore it, but that work is being led largely by a nonprofit organization across a lot of different communities in Beaver County. In Millvale, you know, I think that's kind of a unique situation because I know that the local government there is very engaged, but they also have a very engaged nonprofit organization that I think does a lot of the heavy lifting there. And I think that with Millvale, particularly as just a really solid local example, and actually, you know, I was talking to Zaheen last week. I think that one of the key components that they liked about it was that they already were very active in engaging the community around different conversations. And so I think it was a really good fit because of all of the stakeholder engagement. And so I think it seemed to be a model that worked well for that in terms of making sure that everybody's voice was heard and making sure honestly, that they were addressing a lot of major needs within the community with one framework, because they had, you know, environmental challenges, they had, you know, social challenges, they had all sorts of things, they had food needs. So I think those were some of the key reasons, and I do think that they are, you know, they're still in process, but I think that's a really successful story to look at that's close by that we could learn a lot from.
Excellent.
Hopefully that helps.
So we could have Zaheen Hussein come. I think the Environment Advisory Council was interested in having him address them, but I wanted to have council have an overview of this first because I didn't want to pursue off in that direction if you are not comfortable as a group going even further to explore what this is like. So I'm really looking for some input here about whether you think we should continue pursuing this or whether you think this is not something that's going to work for our community. I think we had a very good history of community engagement until COVID interrupted us. We had 4 or 5 really considerably amounts of engagement in the comp plan development, and people seem to focus on the issue and relate well to that and appreciated it. And I think we got some very broad input from the public. And I think if we could do this around the business district in a similar manner, some way or another, I think people would appreciate the chance to have a hand in a plan like this. But I don't know how all of you feel about that. So
No, I agree with you, Patty, but I think success. I think the model needs to be almost like or the construct of this would have to almost be like a collaboration, almost between government, right? So like our council, right? I think the Environmental Advisory Board, the CDC, and then perhaps even some private, like like a conglomeration of those four things to kind of make that effort successful. And it actually would tie in all these stakeholders. It would tie in members of the community, it would tie in the business folks along the business district. Just a lot of, I guess, a lot of the heavy lifting will be on the upfront planning stages of this, right? To get that construct correct. But then once we do it, I think we can execute. Yeah. It's just a lot of, so I'd be interested in discussing this a little bit more, in committee, but on also maybe if we could have that conversation with that gentleman that was referenced by Leslie.
So he from Millville.
Yes, from Millville, and I think that would be kind of good to kind of understand some of the challenges that they had to wrestle with as part of that process, right? And try to take away some best practices from that.
For sure. Yeah, I think it would be incredibly helpful.
Okay, well, I can arrange for him to come to a subsequent committee meeting before we send the Environment Advisory Council off on a pursuit on this, because it will require some actions from council in order to put this in motion. And I don't want to go too far down that road without getting everyone's ideas about that first. So,
great.
Are there any other questions for Leslie, Marcus, Mr. Tomasik?
No, that all sounds good, Patty. And thank you, Leslie, for coming.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. I appreciate it. And thank you for spending part of your evening with us. This is wonderful. And I enjoy working with you in the Green Building Alliance on a number of fronts. So thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thanks for having me, Patty. Thanks for having me, everyone.
Thanks,
You're welcome.
Leslie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so if that's it, we can then move on to the other committee, next committee, which is planning and zoning, if that's okay with everybody, if nobody has any objections.
No, that's fine with me. Mhm.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find my notes here. Bill, is it okay to get started?
Yes, we can get started.
Okay, Planning and Zoning Committee Manager's Update, just two quick items, and actually one of them is just the outstanding items that are reminders, so I don't have any comments on those. I did want to remind you, though, that I had sent to you an email that I had forwarded to you from Rebecca Vargo, who's the manager in Wilkins Township, about a week or 10 days ago. It's regarding a proposed zoning amendment that Wilkins has, and I wanted to remind you about that. The notes I've given you summarize that they're looking to have a public presentation on August 17th. There's information in the letter as to how to access that, and I can send it out to everybody again if you want. What they're looking to do is a transitional overlay district along Greensburg Pike from the boundary with Turtle Creek to Elizabeth Street. And right now that's an R3 zoning district, but an overlay would include business, medical offices, and special retail. And that would be a part of the old uses. Now, the reason why I wanted to make sure I emphasize this to you is because you, of course, can get involved either as a council or individually as an elected official. I did ask Angela to post it on the website as well, so that if anybody from Greensburg Pike looks at that, they would see that. Why might you or they be concerned or interested? Well, you know, for example, you might want to oppose it because the length of the overlay from Elizabeth down to the Turtle Creek line is long. from Elizabeth to the Franklin Center is actually all residential on Forest Hill side. I believe there's only 2 businesses on the Wilkins side, maybe 3 in that area. And so of course that could affect borough residents who live across the street, depending on what they would do over there. Should they do anything, remove homes or take a lot or something and do something with that. From that point, from Elizabeth on to Franklin Center, that could be a problem for Forest Hills residents. I don't know that. That's of course not up to me to oppose or support. It's up to you. But I wanted to raise that as an example that somebody may a resident may raise from Greensburg Pike because of that area in particular, again, from Franklin Center to Elizabeth. It's maybe something that you would want to eliminate. And I'm sorry, my lights just went out. But anyway, I guess I need to move more. So I wanted to call that to your attention. If you want to do something about it, take a look at that letter. If you did not get the letter or cannot find it, send me an email and I will send you another copy tomorrow or Thursday. Again, August 17th, that's this coming Monday, is when they present it to the public at Wilkins. And because it's a zoning change and it's right along the border, you can have input should you want to. And that was just my example as to why you might, for example, wish to oppose it. That's certainly up to you, though.
Steve, this is Frank. I just have a question on that. I remember the email coming out, and I remember there in person. We had to register. Is that required also for participating via Zoom or remotely?
I believe so, but I don't have the letter in front of me.
It's okay. I'll find the email.
Okay. But again, if anybody else is concerned, let me know. If you don't have the email and the copy from Rebecca, I did send it out probably about 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that.
Yep.
Let me know.
I have a question. Is there any way we can be sure the residents across the street from this, from Elizabeth Street down, receive notice of this so that if they have concerns, they know that they would be directly affected?
Well, they're supposed to notify them themselves, I believe. Is that not correct, Mr. Corbel?
Yeah, usually the notifications go to all the properties within the proposed district and those that abut. So they should have received notice.
And that's in fact why we received it, because we abut here in Forest Hills with this building. That's why we received it. So they should have. But again, I did, like I said, post to have Angela put it on the website. And if you have any folks you want to circulate that with along Greensburg Pike, you might want to do that. Anybody have any other questions about that? If not, I don't have anything else. And Dawn Branzel did not give me a report for number 2 there. So you can move on to number 3.
Now, if we, Steve?
Yeah.
Don, I've seen Don riding around through the borough, so I know he's logging some activities out there. Can we, is there a way to find out the things that he's finding out while being out there?
Yeah, I think with us doing Zoom, I'm going to have him give us something in writing unless he wants to call in. I didn't force it with him right now because, I mean, most of what he's doing, I'm aware of it. It's typical code things and also a lot of tree stuff right now. So I didn't really think it was necessarily critical. I mean, things that he's working on, for example, if you remember that Edgewood driveway with that tree that those folks were at our meeting a few months back, that he's been dealing with that. And we've been working on that. I think that's just about done. There have been a couple of tree issues where there are some people who have experienced dead limbs falling, and we're trying to work through some of that. Roxbury, Edgewood Acres, those places. I know he's also been on some other issues that some of you are aware of, but that he hasn't necessarily reported onto the full group. And that's what I want him to do. Either send an email out to me with a report. I'm gonna have to have him do that, or else have him agree to come on to one of these meetings in the future.
That'd be great. All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Steve.
And I know, I'm sorry, Bill, I know Dave Naylor has been sending you information about what building inspection underwriters has been doing every month. I don't think he did it this time recently, but he has been keeping up pretty much on that.
Will it be in my email?
Yeah, it should be. He's been emailing it out.
All right. I'll look for it. Okay, next we have sidewalk repair and inspection suggestions. Looks like there's a lot of people here concerned about our sidewalks. Is there any discussion on how we're going to take care of this?
Yeah, Bill, no, I just asked for this to be put on the agenda. I don't know if you saw this email or not from Mr. Gamble. He sent to the mayor and borough council. I responded to him and just thanked him for his, his concern and his input. And I thought he actually had a couple pretty good ideas to look into. Obviously, nothing we can get into, right now, nothing quick,
Okay.
especially with the COVID, everything like that going on. You don't want to get into obviously putting any kind of undue financial strain on anybody more than they have it now. But just some ideas to look into for how to, we definitely have some issues with sidewalk repairs in a lot of areas, something I hear fairly often from other people as well. Specifically, I wanted to mention the issue about putting some sort of inspection program in when properties change hands. I thought that'd be a pretty good thing for us to maybe keep discussing down the road and potentially implement something like that. Or if anybody else has any other ideas, they can think about and bring them back to us. But I just want to put that out to make sure everyone saw his email and maybe something to start thinking about. That's all.
Right. Okay. Sounds
I
great. Any more comment?
Can I say something?
I agree with that suggestion. I think that makes some sense that we should look into possibly some sidewalk inspection as part of a property transfer requirement, along with other health and safety inspections. So I would agree with pursuing that through that mode.
Okay. Any more comments about how
Yes.
we're going to take care of that?
Actually, I think Steve was first, so Steve, you should go first.
Okay.
Steve, you're on mute.
I don't know why my unmute's not working right now. You can go first if you want, Marcus. Go ahead.
All right, Bill, we talked about it last week. For a 40-foot property line, it would cost about $2,400. And I like the idea of whenever properties change hands to do something like that. But then again, you would have a patchwork because then if one property in one road with no sidewalks changes property, they will have a mini sidewalk and nothing else. So it has to be, I think, at least block by block. So like Tom said, it's expensive. People will be up in arms. Even if we say we would pay half of it, they would be up in arms. And like half a mile of road on both sides would cost us $300,000, which is pretty much our annual paving budget. So I think it's a good idea to worry, because that's one of the things which I think is bad about Forest Hills, but it's very, very expensive. And I don't know.
I have two things to mention. One, we did do an inspection program once before, about 4 or 5 years ago, and Don was continuing some of that. But when he took over a lot of the tree stuff, he kind of let some of that go. But we did have that. And the gentleman mentions State College Borough. I've talked to the assistant manager up there and a few of their people to try to get an idea of what they're doing. And among other things, they do have a regular program of inspection. They do require, they actually have a team that inspects, and they do quite a bit periodically. I don't know that, I think they have a full staff for code enforcement, not part-time folks like we have. Of course, they're bigger, but they do everything from their business district, which is sizable, much bigger than ours anyway, to residential. Same idea though. And I didn't get a chance to post his comments here because I had to send this out to you early, but what I will do is either on the next committee agenda or in an email, I'll send you some of the things he outlined for me as to what they're doing. And my suggestion would be, if you're interested, keep this on the agenda for next month as well, so you can talk about it if that's okay with the committee members.
I think we should. What do you think, Patty? Tommy?
Yeah, no, definitely give some people some time to get some more ideas, maybe look into it a little more, and then bring those things back to the committee.
This,
That sounds good.
this will also come up if we get the Walkworks grant. There will be some opportunity to put some planning effort into the sidewalk issue if we get that grant. So that's another place we might get some resources to put to this.
Bill,
sounds
can I
good.
make a comment as well?
Sure.
I just want to bring up, I I was speaking to Chris actually, who's our building inspector, off topic in Churchill at one of the properties I just purchased, and he was doing his building inspection and a walkthrough for what needs updated before I could resell the property. And in talking with him, he's come across numerous properties that have changed hands in Forest Hills with things from decks to GFI outlets to fire doors. I mean, these are huge safety issues. I know Patty just said it as well, and Tom, that this needs to be added. I brought this up about 3 to 6 months ago and said that we are the only borough in this area, and I would like Chris to look into this. And I think, Steve, if we could have Chris do a little report, or even you, if you can look up quickly. I mean, I know Churchill does it. I bought properties there. I know Wilkins does it. I know Turtle Creek does it. Those are 3 easy surrounding properties. Actually, I know Braddock Hills does it because I have properties there as well. So all of our surrounding communities are inspecting properties before they change ownership. You need to do this, this, and this before you're allowed to have a residency and an occupancy permit. So I think that those are key things, and that's to keep not only the residents safe, but also the neighbors safe, and now the community safe, with more people walking and more people being home and working from home. The sidewalks is also a huge issue. So I agree. I think we need to keep this on and extend this and talk about this more in depth.
Billy, I agree. I think that we should definitely keep it going, because it's a real important issue. Like you said, with people walking around, might hit a hole in the sidewalk or something, or a car might hit the edge of it and bust a tire or something. So I think it's definitely a function that this borough should definitely keep going. And like Patty says, we're trying to improve the borough to a point where, we can feel that it's really someplace special, more special. And so I agree, Billy, we should definitely keep that process going. How do everybody else agree with that, or is somebody opposed?
I think it's something just definitely keep on or keep looking at and see what we can do.
Yeah, if I could just interject. Yeah, I would like to see it remain on the committee agenda, but I would like us to look very carefully about the implications of absorbing these type levels of responsibility that could come with some of these proposals. I'm not objecting to anything, but I think that's something to think about. The borough would be absorbing an awful lot of responsibility, and with that liability, and it's just something to think about. But it just my throwing an idea out there right now.
Sounds good. Any more comments? Okay, next we're going into any more planning and zoning ideas or opinions that anybody wants to talk about.
I have just one issue, if I may. You know that our Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, had a special investigation of hydraulic fracturing infractions and enforcement in the state, and made a number of recommendations to improve the safety of that operation. And one of them was to increase the setback requirement from 500 feet to 2,500 feet. Now, we have already adopted a zoning ordinance on oil and gas facilities in Forest Hills, but we do have what was at the time the standard setback of 500 feet. And I wondered if you would entertain a minor amendment to our zoning ordinance to increase that from 500 to 2,500 to accommodate the recommendations of that task force and special investigation.
Any feelings on that? Maybe Mr. Corbel?
I have no problem with that. I guess it's kind of Mr. Corbel's recommendation.
Well, I think, I'm sorry, I don't have my video on. My only thought, Patty, on that we have to be careful that if you would implement a 2,500 foot setback, that it wouldn't make that type of development impossible, right? It would be exclusionary. Because you can't do that. I know, even though we say that we are permitting it, If what the setback regulations do is that it essentially means we can't do it, then that's exclusionary zoning. So that's my only concern. We would have to take a closer look at that, looking at the areas where it's permitted, seeing if there are any lots where you could fit a facility that would be 2,500 foot from a setback on all sides of the property. So
Well, I think
it's possible, but we have to do a little homework, I think.
Well, the only concern I had was that a number of people use our oil and gas ordinance as a model. And I want to put something in there that would be less than the optimum as recommended by the Attorney General's report. I think, in fact, if we extended the distance from the location that we have zoned, it would probably be outside the boundaries of the town. It would be outside of Forest Hill, at least on one piece. So we might need to look at that again. Anyway,
Yeah, you could make it bigger, maybe not all the way to 2,500, but you still need to have enough space for there to be that type of development.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
maybe leave well enough alone.
Okay. Any more comments about what Patty's talking about with the idea? Okay, well, we're finished then. Thank you very much.
Okay, just give me a few seconds and I will go to Finance Committee. I just need to get my computer oriented toward that. Oops. Okay, I'm okay if we're ready to start. Mr. Marco, is that okay with you if I start? You're muted, Patty.
Yes, please proceed, Mr. Morris. My computer ran out of ink, so I don't have my finance report printed out. But I know that you have a number of issues that you need to give us, and I would like to hear your report first.
Well, I'm actually going to share my screen with it anyway for part of it. So, okay, Finance Committee for August. First, I did give you a cash flow update through July, and that is attached to your notes that I gave you. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to take a quick look at this chart. The deep red is the 2020 number, and you can see it goes here into July with 1.2, I'm sorry, end of July into August with $1.12 million in cash. That is not terrible. It's one of the lower ones in this 5-year period, with only 2016 being lower. But I did want to show you that at least. I don't know that I have any specific comments about that. It's just something to keep monitoring because of the pandemic, and it kind of relates to the next item I have on the status of our finances. So unless you have a question about cash flow, I'm going to move on to my second notes under B, finance status. First, you should know that the county does have some money from the federal government for COVID-19 funds that can be directed to the municipalities. And for Forest Hills, the maximum amount we can get to defray the costs that we've had so far with COVID-19 is $125,000, which we have applied for. We have more expenses than that, but that is the maximum, and it should be acceptable to them. We're also waiting to see what FEMA or PEMA will do. We know that there's a possibility that there are going to be some reimbursement there. And of course, we're waiting to see what the federal government will do, but I'm not going to comment on that. I'll let you comment if you want. To see
I
if
think
they're
we
going to
have
do
the
anything.
right approach. We keep track of all the costs we have,
Yes,
and then we tap into buckets when they become available.
right.
Yeah.
Like the deficit of the pool, maybe someone would be helping us with that, maybe down the road. You never know. So
Right. We do have other things we can put money put in for. too. And FEMA or PEMA, probably PEMA will do it first and use FEMA money, has indicated to us they would do it. Of course, they will not double count. Anything we submit to the county with this could not be submitted then to them. But still, you know, we will go for that. That will help to defray the costs. Now, I've been giving you in the past some numbers for a potential 2020 revised budget. And rather than go further with that, what I wanted to show you was some key numbers. Here's some key revenues, and I compare them with year-to-date 2019 so that you get an idea of where we are compared to that. Our real estate tax is 2.6 million through July 31st. That's 91% of our budget. At that time in 2019, we had 97% of the budget in. Our earned income tax is 604,000 plus, 61% of our budget. That's pretty close to where we were in 2019, only
And
slightly less.
Sorry to interrupt. The real estate tax, I wouldn't be too concerned. You know, obviously the deadlines got changed, so some people will pay on the last possible day. So I think that's probably
Right.
expected that it's so lower. It's
Right,
nothing.
we did extend that discount period and the period at face. So the face period goes all the way to the end of the year. So yeah, I'm not concerned about it, Marcus. I agree. The local services tax is not huge, but it does bring in a decent amount of money. And we're at 58% of it in 2020 through July, but we had 87% of that through 2019. So that may be an indication that the pandemic has shut some people down as far as, because that's paid by people who are working in the borough, and only having 58% of that collected is probably not good. I raised cable TV franchise only because it's a large number. We're pretty much on track with 2019 for that year to date. The RAD tax, we're not too far off of where we were in 2019. 57% of that's been collected through July, whereas 63% of that was collected through July of 2019. And finally, the refuse recycling fee is another one of those things that people may hold off on paying if they're strapped for cash, but we've collected 75% of what's budgeted so far, and that's about the same as the percentage last year, 76% last year of the budgeted figure. So, you know, other than earned income tax and maybe local services tax, which is not a huge factor, the local services tax, that is, you know, right now we're fairly steady with money coming in. If anybody has, I'll stop for a minute in case anybody has any questions. If not, I'm going to go on to the total general fund numbers. I also thought it would be a good idea to compare total general fund numbers with last year. And you can see it's pretty much on track through July 31st. This year, we've collected 79% of our budget. Last year, we collected 80% of the budget. Total expenditures, we expended this year 63% of what we budgeted. Last year, slightly more, 64%. And of course, we are slowing down spending. We've held back on some things, tree spending and some stuff that Public Works was looking to do. But you know, the money is still there, obviously, and we'll be able to use that if it keeps coming in. So we're pretty much on track. And I show you that because of the cash flow numbers. It's not necessarily terrible that we are where we are with cash flow. So far, we're working out okay. Now, I also just thought you'd want to know where the swimming pool compared, how the swimming pool numbers looked. Obviously, it's not a real good comparison when you're looking at 2020 versus 2019, because 2019 was a full year and 2020 obviously very, very limited. So you can see that what I did was compare revenues with expenditures, and pools generally are a losing proposition. Not in all cases, but most municipalities find that they end up taking in less revenues than they do spending money on their pool. So our revenues are only 32% of expenditures right now in 2020. And the difference is $49,000. That's probably another reason why our cash flow is a bit low. compared to last year when obviously we had revenues 77% of our expenditures and only a difference of just below $30,000, which isn't too bad. That's something we'll just see how things work out. I don't anticipate revenues going up significantly though for this year, obviously, and we're obviously toward the tail end anyway. But it is something to consider, and it does have at least a bit of an effect on us right now. I thought you'd want to know where some of the fees stood too. So I showed you the fire fee revenue status, and this is just the fee itself, not all the revenues for fire fee. We budgeted 176,000 plus for 2020. We've collected 81% of that so far, whereas last year we budgeted slightly less and we collected 97% of that so far. So that could be affected by the pandemic. I know we are continuing to collect, and we have also not penalized people. I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. So that may also be affecting why some people are slower in paying that. I don't know. Sewer fee comparison is pretty close to where it was last year. Our budget for revenue from our fee was $625,000 this year. We reduced it slightly, and we're at 46% of that so far through July versus 2019 where we were at 45%. So you can see from that you know, we're pretty much on track as far as that's concerned. Does anybody have any questions about fees or any of these budget numbers? Whoops, I think I just accidentally turned that off. What happened?
I guess, Steve, my question would be, as we're looking forward to 2021 planning, which of these are the most vulnerable to limitations, you know, that we have to be aware of as we're looking at planning of the budget for next year? I would expect that we might see some earned income tax reductions perhaps. And I don't know what the status of the RAD funds will be going forward, but I'm concerned about those two in particular going forward as part of our budget planning for next year. I think we'll be able to get through this year, you know, being careful, but as we're looking forward to next year, I don't know how our planning framework might need to be adapted in order to anticipate some limitations that will persist into next year.
Yeah, I agree. It could be a problem. It's going to be difficult to plan, and because we're starting the budget, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes, that's one reason why I wanted to raise some of this with some of you, so you could see the status on that. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. I don't know why I'm having trouble with getting out of this screen. Let me go on to my next item here. Can everybody still see my screen?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I can see it.
Okay. 2021 budget preparation starts this month. And I attached a copy of the forms and memos I used to the email I sent you. So you should be able to see it with that email, and hopefully, you know, you'll be able to contribute to that. I think it'd be important this time for council to take a more active part, maybe in the preparation, but that's up to you. As far as doing the budget is concerned, but I'll be handing that out this week to staff and asking them to give me numbers into September, and then giving you a first draft of a budget at the October Finance Committee meeting. The other items I have on here, capital improvements plan. Again, that's tied in with bond issue spending because that's something, of course, you're going to approve. But I wanted to remind people that we're in the process of doing that. We're late because we ended up starting late due to the pandemic and due to the bond issue uncertainty. At least at the time, we weren't certain what was happening with that. So we started that late. Normally, I would be giving you a copy of all the things that were submitted. But what I did attach here was a copy of the June memo I gave you back when you were looking at how much extra money to take out of the bond issue, the refinancing that is. And from there, I thought that was a good start, at least to keep in front of you, keep you looking at. So I know some of you are concerned about how you're going to spend bond issue funds. Again, I would say let the capital improvements plan process work its way through, because we just got the money now. You have 3 years. And believe me, if you think it's going to be hard to spend $500,000 in 3 years, you haven't been paid attention to the budget, because it's not going to be hard, believe me. So you don't necessarily need to start worrying about that right now. I think you need to let the capital planning process go through. Does anybody have any questions about those two items?
Steve, I wondered, is it possibly next month in Finance Committee to really do a budget workshop on putting together not only the adjustments that we might need to make so that we get a better idea of where we might need to make some adjustments, but also to start looking at this capital improvements page with a little finer.
I would wait. The capital improvements, let me give you the items that are submitted first.
Okay, all right.
As far as a workshop is concerned, I will have the budget as a topic on here. How much I would be ready for at that time, I don't know, but that would be a good time for your input if you folks want to have something more to say about a particular item. If you're looking to have a particular item put forward, additional payments somewhere. I don't know there's going to be a lot of room for additional monies, but it might be something that you might want to consider. Does anybody else have any comments on that or anything? Let me go to item E then on my notes here. Back in March and again in June, you guys approved a motion to extend payment deadlines. Allison asked me to ask you again if you could continue that beyond August 31st. The reason being that she'll be sending out sewer bills and they'll be going out before August 31st. And yet, if we're going to put penalties on, that would kind of mix with the bills that have gone out. They would have a different number on than they would if they had penalties. So she's asking if you could at least extend it to September 31st or 30th, I guess, I'm sorry. And my suggestion is you might want to just extend it similarly to what you did with real estate till the end of the year. That's up to you, of course, though, but it would take a motion if you want to do that. She was asking to at least extend, though, through September. And again, that would take a motion too.
How about if we keep the deadlines and payment dates, but waive the penalties this year?
Say that again, Marcus, I'm not following.
I would recommend that we keep all the payment deadlines like we used to do and just waive the penalties. Because people like me, I can certainly afford it. And if I get an invoice with a late date, then I pay it late. You know, if I get an invoice with a normal date, I will pay it on the date. I pay everything on a due date.
I think that's mainly what she wants to do, is just extend the penalty, the deadline from the point of view of the penalty that was put on there. You're right.
I agree. We keep all the payment schedule. You know, the fire fee has a fee. All those dates we keep, but we waive the penalties, I think.
I think it's a good idea, Marcus. Good idea. Sounds good.
Any objections to that? If so, Mr. Morris, you'll put a motion to that effect on the Finance Committee section of the business meeting in August.
Okay, well then I'll do that if there's no objection on the 19th.
Are there any other questions about that? Any other concerns from other members of the council?
Okay.
No, I have none. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, then the last item I have, as you know, we hired DAC, Digital Assurance Certification. They were hired to assist us with the refunding of the bond issue. And that's mainly because compared to the previous time when we refunded a bond issue, the SEC has increased their reporting requirements. They're much more rigorous. And Mike McKagan suggested it's worth, I think we pay them $1,000 a year. It's worth that to get them to keep us abreast of what the SEC requires. So they sent me the email that I have printed on your notes, and it's on the screen too, I hope, saying that they've given us a draft policies and procedures to review. And I attached the full draft to the email I sent you this afternoon, so you could take a look at it. This would allow DAC to inform the SEC that we do have something in writing that shows we're in compliance with what the SEC is looking for as far as bond investment and spending, et cetera, is concerned. So what I would suggest, and I asked Mike McKagan, he agrees it's probably worth doing. It's not critical, but it's probably worth doing. That either at your August meeting, if you have enough time to review it, if not at the September meeting, approve the policies and procedures that DAC has come up with.
Oh, I was wondering, I did print that out just this afternoon, but I haven't had a chance to read it. Could you summarize what section 3 is in particular?
I looked at that after I sent this out. I looked at that too, and I'm not sure what they're talking about. I need to ask her.
Okay, so I think we could probably put this on for September, because I would like to have a chance to really understand what we're agreeing to here.
Yeah.
If there are policies that we're going to need to specifically adopt, I'd like to really understand what it is that we're adopting here. And I will read it in detail, but I just got it late this afternoon. Haven't had a chance. It's like 15 pages.
Yeah, I know. It only came a few days
I
ago.
understand, yeah, but I would like to have a chance to look at it. So if we don't need to act on this until September, I would like to delay that until September so we have time to look at it in full.
Yeah, I don't think we do. And I wanted to check on what the section 3 reference was too, because when I looked at it, I didn't really see a clear section 3 that looked like it was anything important. They did have something numbered 3, but it didn't seem like it was anything critical. So I will keep it on the agenda too for the finance meeting in September, and then I'll consider it for a vote in the September meeting, assuming you're okay with it then.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't have anything else for finance, unless somebody has a question for me or something else. Nobody gave me anything to add.
Yeah,
But I didn't know.
the only thing I'd like to mention is that the Connect group has been looking at ways to put the needs of municipalities and boroughs forward in Harrisburg for assistance to local governments. And one of the things that they're particularly pressing for is planning funds to look at collaborative agreements and collaborative services that might help down the road to ameliorate costs for municipalities. I have no further details about that, but they are looking at those directions. So if any of you are interested in knowing more about how that's going, please feel free to call me about it. And I'll give you updates as soon as we have anything in those. Okay, anything else under finance that anyone else wants to raise? I'm fine with that.
Well, if there's nothing else, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Tomasic, we can move the committee of the whole in about 30 seconds if you're okay with that. Just let me
Go
get
ahead.
it. Let me get it on my screen here for myself. Okay. I'm ready. Actually, manager's update. I wasn't sure how many of you would be on right away. So I just put that reminder on there from the Planning and Zoning Committee about the Wilkins Township Greensburg Pike zoning amendment. I wanted to make sure you paid attention to it. So if you're already okay with that, I really don't have anything else to report. And that's all I have. No, we can't hear you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I think number 3, the crosswalk issue is self-explanatory. That's the recommendation and the rules that came from our engineer. Questions, comments? Okay, number 4, right to respond policy. If you can bear with me a couple of minutes here. As you know, there was a written statement that was put into the borough files by Dan Sharp, in which he states, upon checking the security cameras, officers observed Councilman Tomasic standing near the front of the conference room. He was still yelling very loudly and using the terms C and B. When I first got a hold of this, okay, I'm getting cut out on the video. I asked the chief about responding to this. He said, well, there's no way for you to respond. And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, it's a hearsay statement. I said, the witnesses are unidentified and it's a smear on me. I said, and I have a witness to the event. So that leaves me in a position where, and anybody, not just me, a position where there can be statements in there that are very detrimental to your character and you can't do anything about it. So what I'm asking is to have council agree to have a policy written by Mr. Corbel, which would give anybody that is named in a given written report by the police an opportunity to respond. So they would be able to simply write a statement, have it notarized, and attached as part of the report. Because if I can't do that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, anybody could go into this because it's a public document, bring it up. And what's to say that that didn't really happen? So I think that as a resident, as a citizen, that we need to be able to respond to things which we believe are incorrect. So I would ask that we give Mr. Corbel permission to write up a basic right to respond statement. He brings it back to ops and policy, and we discuss and adopt it, my opinion, and put it in there so that we can have that right to respond. Yes, Marcus.
Just to clarify, you mean that applies to any citizen? If someone gets pulled over for something, they can still file that same notarized report part of it whenever any police report, anything.
Right, if they're named in it specifically. Yes. Okay. Right. In that situation, they would be able, however, to go to court. Okay. I can't go to court.
Yes, but it really applies to any citizen, any report, no matter what.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, any citizen that is named in a public document like that should have the right to go on record to challenge the statements therein. Right now, we don't have any way to do that. And yes, for any citizen.
Okay. Okay,
I would think it's a basic thing that we should do.
Marcus?
I wonder if we should get one little step further. You know, if police writes a report about me, let's say I got pulled over, I don't know necessarily if I will ever see that. If it, you know, like in your case was a bit different because they had the complaint. But I wonder if there's a report about anyone, should there be like someone telling you, hey, police, that you are in that police report XYZ. You know, you didn't get a notification about that. You only heard about it because of the complaint.
Well, anytime that you have a situation, you can file a right to know request. And that's what I did.
I know, but I shouldn't have to do it. If they write something about me in a police report, I should know what it is.
Well, that's a different matter right now. Mr. Corbel, could you chime in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any issue with us adopting a policy that would allow response, but I think what Marcus's point is that how would you know if, right? And so, you know, it doesn't need to go further where if a resident or citizen of the borough is named in a report or in your case, President Tomasic, in a log entry, should they be notified or provided with a copy so they can see it? I think that's what Marcus is trying to say, and I can understand the thought process there because, how would, if a complaint wasn't filed against you, Mr. Tomasic, we would really not know that there was a log entry. We would have no way of knowing.
That's exactly what I think.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I wonder if we should go that one step further. If they file a log or report, they should tell the person.
I think I agree with Marcus that if you're named in a police incident or log report of any kind, they have an obligation to tell you and give you a
I guess they don't. They don't.
I know, but they should have an obligation to let you know and give you a copy of it.
Yes, I agree.
I agree. I think this is well brought up, and I would encourage, in my opinion, I would encourage Mr. Corbel to consider how we can address that issue also. I think it's a very, very, very valid point.
I also agree. I think that a citizen should have a right to speak up as to how they feel about issues. And the police department is a powerhouse of suggestions, but I still think that even though they can make all these suggestions and write all these things down, I think we should know about that and have a chance to think about it and possibly respond to it.
Okay, so Mr. Corbel, how about if you start that process for us? We can then kick it into ops and policy and discuss it in that committee in the next month.
Yeah, I will reach out to the chief and just to talk about more of the administrative side of things to understand the system. And then I'll have a draft prepared for the ops and policy meeting next month.
Steve, I have a question for you. Have you come across this in any other municipality?
I have not. Nope.
Okay, so I guess my question here would be, I don't have an issue with it one way or the other, but I feel that this could be very costly to the taxpayers. For instance, someone is named or cited or whatever from another borough, then comes into our police department and is tying up man hours, or to our secretaries once we open back up, to receive a copy or request a copy of this incident report or whatever it may be. So I feel like there's a lot more than just, oh, you're named in a report. Okay, well then you have to come up here. Oh wait, then we're printing it. Oh, and then this person has to look it up. I think there's a lot more to it than just, oh, you're named in this report, so you can have a copy of the report. So I think we need to really think about this from a feasibility aspect and an access issue, as far as who's going to be handing this out, who's entitled to receiving it, is this person going to pay for it? I mean, those are all, I think, points that need to be addressed when this is brought up.
I mean, I think those are legitimate points, and those are the things that council can talk about once you have a draft policy and, ask those questions and make a decision ultimately. I don't think it necessarily changes what I would write up as a policy, other than, I will be talking to Chief Williams just to understand the systems and the process. And obviously my focus will be on hitting the high points and certainly, doing it in such a way that it doesn't create an administrative burden, at least no more than would be required under the right to know law.
Okay, so let me, go ahead, Pat.
If the police are making an allegation or a report against a citizen, they're obviously going to take their name, address, and so on and so forth, particulars. I think they have an obligation to inform that person, and stamps are not that expensive.
Oh, okay, I agree. Could we break this down into two parts? First of all, the right to respond. That's a separate issue from the second part that Marcus brought up. So let's get that policy written first, and then you simply have the right to do that. And then we can work on the second part of it with the technical aspects and so on that Mr. Corbel said he would look into with the chief. Is that acceptable?
Absolutely.
That's fine, fine with me.
All right. Moving on to number 5. Numbers 5 and 6 basically go together. Budget process and dollar values. If you recall at the beginning of the year, or excuse me, at the beginning of the COVID crisis, we discussed possible problems with our finances and revenue streams. So we set aside 20%, which I believe is somewhere around $67,000. So if there is any part of the budget which is fixed at the beginning of the year, and that $67,000 is included, that should be our first go-to if we want to take any type of action to take care of any problems that we might encounter. So all I would say here is that anytime we have an issue to deal with, that we have to discuss it as a council, a full council, and we have to approve any of those changes to the budget. That's all I have to say about that. Questions? Number 7, committees. First of all, the committee or the chair has no authority whatsoever to make any changes to policy, to institute any ordinances, and so on. Your job as a committee is to come in, take an issue which you have been presented with or that you have come up with, to discuss it in committee, to investigate it, and then to propose or not a solution to that particular item. All right, so whenever we're talking about this process, it has to go any type of change in front of the complete and full council to make any changes to a policy, etc. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
I guess next is my report, and my item is an executive session item about the Forest Ridge Condo Association. I just wanted to get some guidance from council, go over their request and the legal issues. So I don't have anything to report publicly. Mr. Morris has his hand up though.
Yeah, just for information, there are no attendees left. We are live streaming this on YouTube. I can stop that though when the meeting is done. If you wanted to have an exec session via Zoom on that issue, we can do that.
I mean, as I've said before, I don't, particularly care for Zoom executive sessions, but this isn't exactly, we're not going to be talking about the secrets about the Manhattan Project or something like that. This is just a walkway issue, and I think we can handle that tonight. Whenever we're done with the committee of the whole, which I think is imminent.
If everybody, I will do that if everybody is in agreement with it, unless we have full compliance to discuss only that issue, then, and since it doesn't involve anybody, I can see our way through that. But if anybody objects to that, I would say, please step forward, and then we will not do it in that way. We'll have to find another way to deal with exec sessions. So is everybody on board with doing it tonight?
I don't have a problem with it.
I make a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing the Ridge condominium issue.
All right, so
I
that's what we're
support
going to
that
do.
fully.
Yeah, I approve. Let's move into it.
Okay. Yes, Steve. Steve?
Just give me a moment to shut everything down then. So
Okay, let's all take
done.
5.
No, well, I just need a moment. I just need to get it off YouTube. So I'm going to stop the live broadcast on YouTube. I will also stop recording, correct, Mr. Corbel?
Correct.
Okay, give me about 30 seconds. Hold on. You don't have to go anywhere.
I didn't mean that literally. That was one of my stage directions. Take 5.